Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be unpacking a concept today that is honestly so profound and for a lot of people incredibly validating. It all stems from the work of Carl Jung. Now, if you've ever experienced that very specific, undeniable pain of watching literally everyone else around you effortlessly hit those traditional life milestones, picking a career, getting married, moving forward with all this highly visible momentum, while you feel like you were just perpetually stuck in the mud, then this explainer is absolutely for you. We're going to explore this idea called the Cathedral of the Soul, and why what society calls your failure to launch might actually be a high-level psychological construction of a rare, completely unstoppable self. So, let's dive right in.
Have you ever felt completely out of sync with your own timeline? I mean, you know the exact feeling I'm talking about, right? It's not exactly jealousy, and it's not exactly confusion, but it's this deep, quiet certainty that the path everyone else is walking just isn't yours. But the catch is, you can't find yours either. So what happens? You hesitate, you wander around, you start things, you stop things, and you just watch the years pass by as the people around you stack up all the markers of a well-built life. And honestly, it creates this breathless anxiety, this panicked sense that time is literally running out and you are just hopelessly adrift.
But let's just take a collective deep breath here and reframe the whole thing. Society looks at your wandering and slaps a label on it. Failure to launch. Stagnation. But what Carl Jung's theory suggests is actually happening is incubation. You are building a deep, complex psychological structure. That perceived failure of yours, it's actually meticulous, invisible preparation for a very rare life path. You aren't broken at all. You are just building something massive.
Because somewhere underneath all that wandering, you likely have this little inner voice that absolutely refuses to be silenced, and it's whispering a very simple truth. I am not behind, I am just not ready yet. And Carl Jung, a man who spent decades studying the absolute deepest layers of the human mind, made this brilliant, often overlooked observation. He noted that not all people are designed to succeed early. Some personalities are just built for depth rather than speed. And that brings us to Section 1, the illusion of being behind.
That linear timeline you were handed growing up, the one telling you to have it all completely figured out by the time you're 25, well, it wasn't built for you. It was built for people who simply absorb the world around them to build their identity, rather than those who deeply question it. Jung identified something he called individuation. This is the absolute core of his theory. It's a lifelong process, and it does not unfold in straight lines. Instead, it spirals inward to build depth before it ever expands outward. Jung actually believed this was the rarest and most powerful path the human being could possibly walk. For these folks, their inner world, their thoughts, their emotions, their intuitions, and symbols is unusually vivid and highly active.
But here's what's fascinating about having such a vivid inner life. It creates a massive problem early on. When your inner world is louder than the outer one, early adaptation becomes almost impossible. You literally can't just become what society asks you to become. And it's not because you're trying to be rebellious or difficult. It's because your psyche is actively protecting an identity that refuses false alignment. It inherently knows that just copying societal values to fit in would require abandoning a part of yourself it simply cannot afford to lose.
Jung offered a really stark warning about succumbing to this exact pressure. He said, "A life lived in the wrong shape eventually cracks at the seams." Forcing a highly complex personality into a premature identity doesn't give you lasting success, it just produces an inner fracture. So your hesitation wasn't a weakness, it was your mind actively protecting the self that was still forming inside of you.
Let's move on to Section 2, Building the Soul's Cathedral.
Think back to your 20s. That's usually a decade where the contrast with your peers becomes incredibly painful. There are really two distinct paths here. The first is fast adaptation. This is all about building social structures, promotions, marriages, visible forward momentum. It's kind of like throwing up a prefabricated house or slapping together flat-pack IKEA furniture. It's quick, it gets the job done, and everyone driving by can instantly see it. But on the flip side, you have individuation. While everyone else was busy building social structures, you were unconsciously building psychological structures. You were agonizing over midlife questions in your 20s. Questions like, who am I actually? What part of what I believe is genuinely mine? What am I willing to stop pretending about? You see, you aren't building a prefab house. You are laying the invisible, completely unborrowed foundations of a cathedral. It takes decades, and the work is entirely underground at first.
Now, both of these paths have a price, for sure, but the timing is completely flipped. The early adopter, the one who builds on borrowed foundations, pays the price later in life.
Jung observed this often leads to the classic midlife crisis, this terribly hollow feeling behind every single achievement, where your life is the right shape but it's just the wrong fit. The rare personality, on the other hand, pays the price early. You pay for it in confusion, in wandering, and in the very specific loneliness of not fitting in. But you don't pay it later, because once it's built, your core is unshakable.
Which brings us to Section 3, the burden of awareness.
This early price you pay leads right into the deep, isolating abyss of this journey. It's the experience of seeing things you felt you weren't supposed to see. From a very early age, you probably noticed the gap between what people said and what they actually meant. You saw the little social games operating right beneath ordinary conversations. You sensed the sheer emptiness inside the conventional status that everyone else was desperately chasing. Jung called this the burden of consciousness. Basically, greater awareness equals greater suffering. Because when you see right through the illusions that others rely on, participating in normal society becomes incredibly complicated. I mean, how do you compete in the game you fundamentally don't believe in? This often leads to a psychological withdrawal that society mistakenly labels as passivity, or just a lack of ambition.
And here is the hidden, absolutely brilliant mechanism at play. Jung believed that the psyche will actually sabotage your external success if it threatens your inner integrity. If you've ever beaten yourself up wondering why you couldn't just play the game to get ahead like everyone else, this is exactly why. Your soul was not broken during those years. It was simply refusing to cooperate with a life that felt hollow and untrue.
And that leads us to Section 4, loneliness as a stage. We really need to deeply relabel that agonizing isolation you felt. It wasn't some accidental side effect of you doing something wrong. It was a structural, critical developmental arc. In the early 20s, you have the wandering and the hesitation. But by the late 20s or early 30s, you hit what we can call peak loneliness. Why? Well, because for this rare personality type, their inner complexity makes shallow connections feel significantly worse than having no connection at all. You can feel absolutely alien even among a group of people who genuinely like you, simply because what you carry inside doesn't translate into ordinary social interaction.
Now, this peak loneliness is a critical breaking point. Jung identified this as a moment where, unfortunately, many people surrender. They numb themselves, they conform, they trade their true forming self just for the temporary relief of finally belonging somewhere. But betraying the emerging self to fit in creates a lifelong shadow of resentment, bitterness, and this quiet hatred of the version of yourself you became just to be accepted. Enduring that loneliness without surrendering is literally the only way through.
Which finally brings us to Section 5, the quiet emergence.
For those who do endure, all of that inward listening and invisible foundation laying finally pays off. Somewhere in the mid-30s, this monumental shift occurs. The anxiety and the endless comparisons to others are finally replaced by something else entirely. And it's not conventional confidence, which is usually loud, urgent, and relies heavily on external markers. Instead, it is inner coherence. It is quiet, it is incredibly stable, it's grounded in absolute self-trust, and it is completely unborrowed. You just stop asking who you should be, and you finally start fully inhabiting who you are.
When this rare personality finally emerges and really enters life, the markers are unmistakable. You inhabit exactly who you are. Your decisions become highly precise because they're made from alignment rather than anxiety. Your words carry this effortless weight because nothing you say is wasted. And honestly, your mere presence can reorganize rooms without you even trying. You've stopped needing to fit anywhere in particular, and because you aren't consumed by trying to fit in anymore, you can finally truly express yourself. And believe me, people can feel this groundedness instantly.
So, if there is one profound truth you take away from our explainer today, let it be this. The success that comes from this specific path does not rot from the inside. It entirely, completely belongs to you. Everything that happened, all the wandering, all the hesitation, even the years that looked like absolutely nothing was getting done, it was all meticulous preparation rather than waste. You were not behind. You were merely early for a completely different kind of unrushable life.
So I'll leave you with this question. Which part of this long path have you been walking without having the words for it? Take a moment to really reflect on your own hidden journey. Recognize that your wandering was not a failure to launch. It was profound direction. It was the construction of your own soul's cathedral. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, trust your timeline.